Several years ago, I guess this was around 2011, probably sometime in September when everyone was going back to school. This happened to one of my friends named Jessica. Now, Jessica was 13 at the time of this story, and she had got Facebook when she was 12. However, in 2011, it was when she was on her final year of elementary school, aka grade 8, and the next year she'd be going to high school. Now, she told me this story about maybe be at least before Christmas of 2011. This was honestly the weirdest, most scariest encounter she's ever had. Now, Jessica was laid down some rules when her family allowed her to have Facebook, such as only follow people you know very well, don't follow random people, always deny friend requests to people she doesn't know, etc. Usual internet safety for parents and who allow their kids to go online. However, Jessica was online on the first day of school. After their school, she went down on Facebook. When she went on Facebook, she got a friend request from a person named James. She didn't know anyone named. She knows a few people named James, but never knew this one James. His last name was McAlvin. James McAlvin had a profile picture what seemed to be a cartoon character, presumably from SpongeBob. Now, he messaged her when she accepted his friend request, thinking that maybe he was just a friend of hers from school and probably just doesn't remember, or it could be one of her neighbors. She has no idea. James messaged her saying, "Hey Jessica, I saw you're one of my mutual friends and thought I would add you." She looked for the mutual friends of James and realized that he was friends with a few of her other friends from high school. Well, that she met before they went to high school, and even some of her elementary school friends. She honestly asked if he went to the same school as her, but he said no, he didn't. He went to a different school, which kind of made her a bit suspicious. But since she was a 13-year-old girl at the time, she brushed it off as maybe James just wanting to have someone to talk to. So Jessica started talking to him. Basically, she talked about how her day at school was and who her teachers were and etc. As she was going through that, James started asking her if they could talk more when Jessica said that she had to go to bed because she had school the next day. She said sure, and then that was it. However, the next few days went by, and this James person keeps talking to Jessica quite a lot. The next day when Jessica got on Facebook, probably after school, it was on the second day, when James asked if he could see a photo of her, in the present, which then from the past. Of course, Jessica said sure, send him a picture of herself. And then he started to get really creepy. He started asking her to take a picture of herself with no clothes on. This is when Jessica said, "No, that is really inappropriate, be it James." As soon as she said that, she logged off of Facebook and never responded to James. However, on the third day of school, before she went to school, she ended up looking up on her laptop to see if she got any notifications. To her surprise, there were 20 plus messages from James McAlvin. They all range from "Hi" to "How are you" to "You will regret this soon, Jessica." Jessica was quite surprised and a little bit scared at the same time, so she ended up blocking the James account and ended up deleting the messages that he sent her. Everything went well, but she came home alone, and when she walked home in the house home alone with her brother, she could see that her house was trashed. There were garbage everywhere, glass from broken windows, etc. None of the items were stolen, but some of the possessions were damaged. When Jessica went into her room, however, she immediately saw that there was a note from James McAlvin. It said, You got what you wanted, bitch. However, this story still scares her to this day, and now she's more careful on who she's friends with online. The cops were called, but they couldn't find this James McKelvin person, as the Facebook account was taken down shortly after this James person trashed her house. Security cameras were installed around her place, but she's never seen this James McKelvin again. This story is told in the perspective of a female character, and it's not really a character, but it was someone that I knew from school. They prefer to remain anonymous, but we'll call them Jane, mainly for the sake of their privacy. Jane was in sophomore year when this happened, and it was sometime in 2014. Jane was a really A-star student, always kept up with her work and etc. She had her Facebook account made about the time that everybody encouraged her to have Facebook because most of her friends had it. Jane wasn't really crazy on Facebook. Even though her older brother had it, she decided to give it a shot. Jane finally made her Facebook account, and she ended up following basically everybody she knew, her friends from school and family and etc. However, though, something really weird happened when she was in school. When Jane was on Facebook while eating her lunch in the cafeteria, she was sitting with a group of her friends when some woman walked up to her. She seemed to be around Jane's age, maybe a little younger, just maybe a year younger. She was a freshman year in high school, and her name was Samantha. Samantha said that she was new and she had switched schools due to the fact that her parents moved to a different city because there was a bit better job opportunity. Now, Jane decided to let Samantha sit with her and eat lunch, and they started talking. They basically got to know each other and all those comments and all that jazz. However, Samantha asked Jane if she had Facebook. Jane, being the dumb girl she was at the time, said where her Facebook is, so Jane ended up following Samantha. At the same time, Samantha followed her. Now, during this time, Samantha was doing her normal thing. They started acting like they were friends. However, Jane started to realize something weird was about Samantha. Pretty much when Jane went to the bathroom, Samantha was always there. Even when she went there when class was switching. Did Samantha even have class? Why was she in the bathroom all the time? She basically didn't say anything, even though Jane asked her and questioned her. But she just acted like she didn't care or that she ignored her. Jane ended up just ignoring Samantha throughout the next couple days. Even the weirdest thing was Samantha didn't even come to lunch one day. This was kind of weird. So Samantha texted Jane saying, "Hey, I'm out at a store. Do you need anything?" Jane honestly asked Samantha why she wasn't at school and was she supposed to be in school. Of course, Samantha didn't reply, so Jane ended up getting some suspicions and confusion. She didn't want to go to the school at the time because she was afraid her school would find out and she'd get in a lot of trouble. But at the same time, though, Jane and Samantha talked on Facebook. Of course, Samantha came to one of Jane's classes, asking if she could borrow Jane. Jane ended up leaving what seems to be her English class, and Samantha asked her for some money for drugs. Obviously, Jane worked at a part-time job at Walmart, but that was not visible to the public, not even online. She said, no, sorry, I don't have any money." Samantha all of a sudden had a knife and she pulled it out and said, "You better give me the money or I'll slit your throat." Jane was honestly scared at this point, not knowing what Samantha was going to do. Eventually, eventually a principal came up and they ended up asking Samantha and Jane a bunch of questions. Of course, Jane was let go early since her parents were picking her up for a doctor's appointment. So the principal understood that. But the next day, though, however, was weird. The night before, Jane told her parents about Samantha, and they suggest that she blocks the number if she had it, or block the Facebook posts. She blocked Samantha and unfriended her and stopped talking to her, and ended up just feeling very glad to be rid of Samantha. She knew something weird was going on with Samantha that day, so the weekend went out really well since nothing happened. Although something really messed up that began happening was when Samantha looked at security cameras when she came to try to visit Jane's house. How she found out where Jane lived was a very mystery. So the security cameras were able to pick it up, but due to the audio being shitty and the grainy footage, the police couldn't identify Samantha. Jane went back to school on Monday, and the principal asked Jane to come to the office. As soon as Jane did that, she ended up realizing that this Samantha girl was no one from the school that they knew. Sure, they knew a lot of Samanthas, but it turns out that this Samantha person, was actually 18, and she wasn't from the school. How did they not even realize or recognize Samantha not being a student is another mystery, but Jane honestly was threatened with a knife to give her the money. Of course, the cops had arrested Samantha, and she has never set foot on the school property again. Jane had deleted her Facebook because of this incident, paranoid that Samantha would one day come out and find her. But as of this day, Jane has no idea if Samantha is still out there or if she's still in prison. She will never use Facebook again, and she certainly doesn't want to find out if Samantha has returned. This happened to be the freakiest story of all time. This actually happened to one of my friends, which at the time his name was Nathan. Nathan had Facebook in 2014, and this took place in 2017. Nathan was 19, and one of his best friends, which was a guy named Seth, apparently got beaten up, and so much to the point by a group of gang people who tried to rob him when he was walking home from work that night. He apparently was found dead the next morning, and even though Seth still had his Facebook account, the news was spread out by his parents, as Nathan had been friends with Seth forever. It turns out that Seth, when he was being beaten up by this group of people, was because they had guns and knives and they beat him to death. It was taking place in an alleyway of a dangerous part of town, so Nathan was very devastated at the time. One night, Nathan was on Facebook chatting with his girlfriend when he gets a message from Seth's profile picture. Of course, Seth's profile and his picture was that of nothing. Of course, maybe he thought that maybe Seth's parents were on there and maybe doing some things. But one of them said, "Hey, Nathan." Nathan was quite surprised, but Seth is already dead, so there was no reason how he could message him if he was dead. He thought that maybe it might have been Seth's parents, but so Nathan said, aren't you supposed to be dead, Seth? Unless this is one of the parents. After about a few minutes, when he was talking to his girlfriend, Seth replies with, "I'm the real Seth." This was honestly starting to get creepy, so Nathan thought that maybe Seth's account was hacked, and this might have been the case. You are crazy if You think this is funny. I know the real Seth is dead. Unless this account's hacked, you're not the real Seth. As soon as Nathan messaged that, the message replied with, I am the real Seth, Nathan. Don't be such a jerk. Of course, Nathan ended up realizing that this was the fake Seth, so he ended up trying to call Seth's parents. Since he still had Seth's number, well, he was dead, so there was no reason why he could call Seth if he was dead. He started to call Seth's parents, and it was around 1 a.m. The mom picked up and said, oh, hello there? Nathan ended up telling them that the profile pic Seth was messaging him, and even though he was supposed to be dead, he asked if it was the dad or her messaging him. The mom said, that's not me or his dad, as we have disabled his account. How is that possible? Nathan ended up sending the screenshots of the convo to Seth's parents. They were honestly shocked and said, this account must have been hacked. I was meant to delete it, but I got so busy due to work and that. Nathan was advised to block Seth, and he did, realizing that account was most likely hacked. He doesn't even know if that was to be the case or if it was paranormal. Nothing like this ever happened since, and this experience really freaked Nathan out. For some context of what made this story very messed up, it's not the really type of story that makes you jump out of your pants or anything, but I feel that this is something that I should share. This happened to one of my friends, which her name was Mandy. Mandy was in her early 20s, and this took place in 2016. Mandy had a Facebook account, and her last name was Archie. I know it's a kind of a weird last name, but Mandy Archie was someone that worked at a grocery store, as she had worked 2 different jobs due to the fact that she was living alone in this one apartment. It was mainly because her boyfriend and her had broken up, so she ended up having to move out into a small apartment. It's only large enough to fit a bed, some tables and chairs, TV, and possibly bathroom and etc. It's like almost crammed in, but you get the idea. Mandy was home alone most of the time, although sometimes her friends come and stay at least a few nights or etc. because then she had an extra guest bedroom. However, one of the guest bedrooms was being repainted by Mandy, so she was on her Facebook texting one of her friends. While she was texting one of her friends, she was on her bed basically scrolling through Facebook when she took a photo of herself to show one of her friends. And one of her friends said that there was one who just crawled under the bed. Mandy looked down and looked under the bed to see that there was a person. The smell of alcohol and marijuana hit her in the head, so she ended up seeing that this person was facing the other way, so he couldn't see her. Mandy rushed out of her apartment, and she went down to the front desk and called the cops. The cops arrived, and they arrested the man. It turns out that he was mentally unstable. He somehow must have found his way in her apartment, probably with a key or something. Since Mandy was located on the 3rd floor, there was no way he could get in by the window. Mandy was now more feeling afraid, so she moved to live with her parents until she could find a decent place, and at least so she can find some roommates. She's never seen this man again, and she wondered why he was doing under the bed, and what would he have done to her if no one on her Facebook page, or at least DMing her on Facebook, noticed him. In 2018, one of my friends used to hitchhike a lot, and this is when he was living in the country. We'll call him Kyle. Kyle was basically living in the countryside at the time. He was in his mid-20s, probably 25 at most. He was walking to his parents' house, which they lived in the city, and while he lived in the countryside in the outskirts with his grandparents, he normally knows for a fact that hitchhiking was a bad idea. Normally, the grandparents would drive him there, he would drive himself there, or sometimes the parents would pick him up there. Since his car was in the shop, there was nothing much he could really do, since his grandparents were busy. They were too busy and didn't have time to take him there. And his parents, well, the mom was out and the dad's car was in the shop. Kyle decided to hitchhike, and into most people's eyes, it was a bad idea. Kyle's done it before, so he honestly didn't really care. As Kyle was hitchhiking a walk, he came across what seemed to be an SUV. It looked like a 2016 SUV, so he decided to hitchhike a ride. Then when the SUV stopped, rolled down its window, it appeared to be a man. He seemed to be maybe in his mid-40s, and he looked at Kyle and he said, "Where to, dude?" Kyle said that he wanted to go to his parents' house in the city. So the dude opened his door and he climbed in for the passenger front seat. As soon as he did that, however, the driver began to drive him to some places. However, though, he asked for his name, and his name was Anthony, and he seemed to be quite nice. Anthony asked Kyle if he had Facebook, to which Kyle stupidly gives him the Facebook information of him. This Anthony guy said, "I used to live in the country too, used to hitchhike rides from multiple people, says I knew them in the area." He would say that, and Kyle would just shrug it off as maybe being just a friendly neighbor. At that point, this Anthony person started acting weird. Kyle looked on his phone for his Facebook and texted his dad saying that he was going to be there in a bit. As soon as Anthony drives and drops off Kyle to his parents' house, Kyle friended what seemed to be Anthony, but his profile picture was questionable. It's a photo of a horse, but he couldn't really remember too much. But since he friended Anthony, he seemed to be pretty chill and nice. So, with that said, Kyle just shrugged it off and continued on with his day. However, though, things only began to get really messed up and more weird. Kyle would be talking to Anthony quite a lot, and most of the days when he was spending with his family, it seemed to go very well. However, though, this Anthony dude one time was pretty much asking Kyle certain things like, does he have a girlfriend? Does he have a wife? Does he have any family members, etc., besides his parents and grandparents? Of course, Anthony was asking him too many questions, so Kyle decided to lie and said no, no, no. However, though, this kept going on for quite a while. When Kyle was home alone in the countryside, his grandparents had gone out to do something. Kyle was on his Facebook basically talking to people when Anthony messaged him saying, "Hey, can I go to your place?" Kyle just politely declined, saying that his grandparents weren't home and that they didn't know Anthony. However, though, Anthony ended up telling him, "Come on, please," over and over again. Anthony said to him one last time on Facebook, "No," and that was the end of it. After Kyle blocked Anthony, he ended up going to play games when he ended up talking to his guy friends, saying that there was someone in his yard. Kyle looked outside but couldn't see anything due to how dark it is, since it was nighttime, when all of a sudden he heard a clattering noise coming from the shed in the backyard. Kyle looked up with his phone light that it all could bring him. It was the man. It was Anthony, and he seemed to have a large axe. Kyle immediately called the cops and ran into his car and drove at least a few feet away until the man wasn't there anymore. When Kyle ended up getting the cops involved, the cops immediately escorted him and his vehicle back to the house. The grandparents were called and they were aware about this incident. It turns out that Anthony had been wanted for assault and even break-in. He was known to abduct people and kill them in the middle of the road when no one was looking, and do God knows what to people, especially to women. Anthony was arrested and Kyle has not seen him since. Eventually, the Facebook of this Anthony person was taken down, and Kyle now makes more awareness to anyone who ever talks to some people who asks for Facebook information. They should not give it to anyone random. And if you do have Facebook, don't give it out to anyone you don't know.